faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. My heart has no desire to stay where doubts arise and fears dismay, though some may dwell where these abound. My prayer, my aim is higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. I want to live above the world, though Satan's stars at me are hurled. For faith has caught the joyful sound, the song of saints on higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. I want to scale the utmost high and catch a gleam of glory bright, but still I'll pray and I found. Lord, lead me on to higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. Please be seated.
If we were to ask just a simple question, what is the most important thing to you in life, what would your answer be? We've mentioned in previous lessons, you can tell what people value the most by looking at their calendar and their checkbook, where they spend their time. And since time is money, where do they spend their money? And usually those two things will reflect what's really important to them, their priority. You know, I always admire people that make great sacrifice to achieve a goal. Anyone that goes to college, we have college students here, it's quite an investment financially, isn't it? And it's 4 to 6 years out of your life, depending on how diligent you are in your course of study, of sacrifice just to get that degree. So why would you do it? Because you think the profit or the gain realized by investing that amount of time and money is worth it. It outweighs any type of investment. And that's true with anything else. Now, when you go to college, are there perks along the way? Fun activities, just the enjoyment of being at college. And you should enjoy all those perks, but what if they become the priority and studies become second place? Then you got misplaced priorities and you're in for trouble. And same way with Christianity. What is the most important thing in our life? And your answer is going to really be the same answer that Jesus is asking when we look at Matthew 16, which was read for us, where he asks a question that is the same question, but he asks it in two different ways. He begins by talking about the sacrifice that discipleship requires. In verse 16 said, if anyone wishes to come to me, let him deny himself and then take up his cross and follow me. That's actually verse 24. The word wish there is thelo. It's your will. It's your desire. It reflects what you want out of life. And being a Christian is a matter of choice, isn't it? It's a matter of desire and making it a priority. And Jesus says it's got to be a high priority. And he introduces really what we call the paradox of discipleship, or the paradox of the gospel. Because if you want the reward that God is offering by faith, you got to deny yourself right now. There has to be sacrifice. Pick up your cross and follow me. Then he makes this amazing statement where he says, whoever wishes to save his life isn't going to end up losing it. But if you choose to lose your life, you'll end up saving it or finding it. And that's a paradox, isn't it? But it's what he's saying, that if you have long-term goals and you accept that in faith and trust that God will reward you for seeking him, he'll give you riches that you can't even imagine, the glory in heaven, eternal life. He also promises, I'll take care of you while you're on this earth. But I just want you to now not worry about yourself. Let God take care of that. And now you follow him and serve him. So it's a message of pain before the gain. It's a message of suffering turned into glory. It's a message about winning and losing. But we have to get things in the right priority. Many people today identify themselves as Christians, don't they? Yet their attitude towards Christianity is, what can I get out of it without having to give anything? When actually the true message of Christ is, what Jesus says, I'm going to give you everything. What can you give me? And it's totally reversed. As one author, to quote him, said, Jesus has been turned into a utilitarian genie who must jump at our every whim when we rub the magic lantern. And what people really fail to see is they're cheating themselves, settling for the short end of the stick. They're trading eternal riches of glory for short-term pleasure. So Jesus is challenging this status quo in the Christian world by asking, what would you give in exchange for your soul? That question is found in verse 27. And both questions are there. And then the promise is made in verse 28. For the Son of Man is coming in glory. Verse 26, I'm sorry. What will a man be profit if he gains the whole world and forfeits his own soul? Second question, what will a man give in exchange then for his soul? And then the promise, verse 27, the Son of Man is coming in his glory of his Father with his angels and will recompense, that word means repay or reward, as we saw last week, every man in according to his deeds, the life he lived on this earth. We just want to look at these two questions. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? And the second question, what would you give in exchange for your soul? Same answer should be given to these two different questions, but approached from two different points of view. So let's look at the first one. When Jesus asks, what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world? The word gain is to make a profit. It's to invest in some type of business activity, and you maybe buy something at this price and sell it at a higher price, and then the cost, the money, the profit you make is not just the final price, it's that less the cost of goods sold. And the difference is your gain. It's a financial term. And Jesus is trying to get us to think in profit loss as far as opportunity costs. Because we have one life to spend on this earth. And how we spend it will be determined on the profit or gain that we will receive. So he says, okay, let's put this in an extreme. Suppose you could gain all the riches of the whole world, but you had to give up your soul. Now, a lot of movies have been written about selling your soul to the devil. A lot of plays, songs. Even books written on this theme, because it's just really a theme that captures really so much of what goes on in people's lives, their struggles. And you say, well, before I answer the question, can you tell me how much the world's worth? Okay, if we need to do that. The aggregate total global wealth. Now, I don't know how they determine that, but we'll just trust the experts. $317 trillion. And you say, well, how much is that? It's more than you need to spend. You can never do it. It says there's 42 million millionaires in the world. That's 42 billion. That's a lot of millionaires in the world. So you put up all the wealth that's in derivatives and gold and cash and everything. You put 317 trillion. He says, would you take that for your soul? So what if that's what you gained, but you had to forfeit your soul? I mean, if that's what would you profit anything then? Well, I guess not. Because if I lose my soul, and we're talking about eternity, sure, I gained and won my life on this earth, that it was temporary, but I've lost it where it really matters eternally. Let's reword the question. So maybe we could ask it this way. What would you take to die right now? Or what would I have to give you for you to die right now? And you say, well, that's a stupid question. Well, let's just play the game. If I gave you $1 million, would you die right now? And you go, well, no. Okay, 100 million. That's more than you ever could spend in your lifetime. Would you take 100 million to die right now? Well, no. Well, how about $1 billion? And you go, no. Why? Because my life would be over. Yeah, it's more money that I could spend in a lifetime, but my life would be over. You understand? He said, well, can I give it to my children? No, because some people might take that deal, right? So how much would you take to give up your life right now? And the person would say, nothing, because my life is more valuable than all the aggregate worth of the world. Would we all agree? But sometimes we say that, but we live in a different way. Listen to what the psalmists write, the sons of Korah, in Psalms 49. This is not a new condition that afflicts man, being seduced by the pleasures or just the things of this world that really don't pay dividends. It's been that way all along. In Psalms 49, he said, why should I fear in the days of adversity, when the iniquity of my foes surrounds me? For those who trust in their wealth and boast in the abundance of their riches. Because no man, by any means, can redeem his brother. This is exactly what we're talking about here. Or give to God a ransom for him. You can't save your brother with no matter how much wealth. For the redemption of his soul is costly. And he should cease trying forever, that he should live on eternally. You can't buy eternity. That he should undergo decay. Verse 10, for he sees that even wise men die. The stupid and the senseless, they also perish. And they leave their wealth to others. In other words, it doesn't do you any good what you acquire, because once you're dead all over. Then you face real life in the next world. Their inner thought is that their houses are forever. That's what they think. And their dwelling places to all generations. They've called their lands after their own names. Isn't that what people do? They name their empires or businesses or their states after their own name. See, this has been going on forever. But man in his pomp will not endure. He's like the beasts that perish. This is the way of those who are foolish and of those after them who approve their words. Jesus is asking the same question. What kind of profit is there to gain everything in this world but lose life eternally? Now, if things come our way, fine. I love the example of a Solomon when God says, just ask for it, you'll get it, no matter what you want. And I don't know how long Solomon pondered, but what was his request? It wasn't pleasure, it wasn't kingdom, it wasn't power, it wasn't riches. He says, Lord, who am I to govern this mighty people? Give me wisdom. And God was so impressed with his answer. He says, since you didn't ask for money and riches, I'll give them to you anyway, since you asked for wisdom. See, our God is a God that blesses us. But the priority has to be something more than just temporary things that go away after using. Now, if you survey people, they'll say 9 out of 10 say, health is more important than wealth. Would you not agree? Yet, that's easy to say if you're wealthy. Surveys show that the wealthy tend to live longer for various reasons. But actually, most people live as though wealth is more important. So I have to ask the question, what would I give for my soul? I have to treasure Jesus more than anything. Notice what he asks, he has to deny. None of you can be my disciple, he says, who does not give up all his possessions. If you're put in a circumstance you need to sacrifice all and you choose the possessions over me, can't be my disciple. In Luke chapter 9, he says, hey, you want to follow me? Because this man said, I'll follow you. He says, the foxes have a place to sleep. The Son of Man has no place to lay his head. You sure you want to come? Because you're going to have to give up potentially comforts of this world. And we see in Luke chapter 14, anyone that comes to me doesn't hate his own father or mother. That means love less. Because if you get to a point where you have to choose, will I follow God, my father, or my earthly father? And I choose my earthly father, I've hated God. I've denied him. So we have to even deny affection sometimes to choose that which is eternally a priority. He who loves father and mother, he says, more than me, is not worthy of me. So if it ever comes to a circumstance that I have to choose my heavenly family over my earthly family, priorities would say, always him, because it's eternal. What would we give to follow Jesus? We read Psalms 47, but let's go to the next question. Jesus asks this, what will a man give in exchange for his soul? Suppose then you sold your soul to the devil. What would you pay to get it back? Or, if you had the opportunity to buy a place in heaven, how much would you give for it? What value would you put on that? Now, we already mentioned that people believe that health is more important than wealth. And when you look at the uber rich, they're trying to buy more time on this earth. And it's interesting, you could just look at the articles and see what happens. And Larry Ellison, he's the CEO of Oracle Corporation. You might know who that is. Net worth $43 billion, the fifth wealthiest person in the world. He's talking about death. He says, death doesn't make any sense to me. Death has never made any sense to me. How could a person just be there and then just vanish and just not be there? See, he's speaking from a spiritual point of view, whether he realizes it or not. There's got to be more to life than just an existence here and money. And so what is he spending his money on? He's developed a foundation dedicated to ending mortality. And they have really some of these pie-in-the-sky ideas that they can get men to live forever. Paul F. Glenn, he's a venture capitalist, and he predicts, he contributes to the Methuselah Foundation. Methuselah is what? The oldest man recorded in the Bible, 969. He says the first person to live to 1,000 years is alive right now. We don't know who it is because we're just still coming up with the technology to preserve his life to 1,000 years. Now, the reason I'm bringing this is people understand their life is more important than their wealth. Because if you have all the wealth and you die, it's worthless. And life, when it's compressed, is just a short amount of time. And it's like we're taking all the wealth of the world for just nothing. I got to die today. I can't even use it. So Jesus says, is that a good deal? What would you give to buy your soul? We have other examples, and I think it's just amazing what's going on. Currently, we have what you'll see is young blood transfusions. You heard of that? It's going on currently. They take teenagers and buy their blood, and they have a transfusion of their blood into your body. It's very expensive, but they have this theory that somehow it's going to promote longevity. Not only that, people are trying to digitize their mind and put it into like a computer and back it up on a hard drive, right? And then you're alive in cyberspace in the cloud. Some have tried to develop a robot later that they can then download your mind that they've digitized into that robot. And they believe it's going to happen. And they're literally spending millions of dollars on this. And Peter Thiel, if you know he is one that's involved in heavenly. Cryonics, you know that? You heard of that? And it's the idea of freezing your brain or your whole body. There's a price for both. And then they can thaw you out later, and they can cure whatever ails you so you can live longer. Of course, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Branson, even Paul Allen before he died, they're trying to colonize space. Because the idea is you get off this earth, you could perhaps live longer if you live somewhere else. The uber rich understand life is more important than money. Because if you have all the money in the world, but your life is cut short, it's over. They understand what the psalmist said. Even the stupid die. Doesn't matter if you're smart, it's not going to make you live longer. We face the judgment. And so the question that Jesus asks again is, what would you give to buy your soul? What would you sacrifice? And when you ask that, people will spend their entire fortunes just to stay alive a little longer. Well, Jesus said the same thing. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in the field. And a man, when he found it, hid it again. And then from joy, he goes out and sells everything he owns just so he can buy that field. Now, I've heard a lot of questions. You're about thinking, man, I don't know if this is fair because maybe that treasure belongs to someone else. Stop. This is an illustration, okay? And it's true today that if you find lost treasures, even in a sea like a sunken ship, you can make claims to it. Just go with the story, is what he's saying here, right? It's not about some morality. He's saying if you found a treasure in the field and it would make you rich forever, and you could buy that field for $10,000, or maybe it was $100,000, would you sell everything you have to get the field? He said, well, that's the way the kingdom is. What would you give for your soul? He says another illustration, he said a merchant was seeking fine pearls, and he found a pearl of great value. It was so extraordinary. He said, well, how? It doesn't matter. Just go with the story. It was so valuable that he sold everything. Now, if he's a pearl merchant, you think he had quite an inventory? Perhaps. Worth quite a bit. He sold it all just to buy one pearl. He's trying to put in perspective what a soul's worth. Homer, who wrote supposedly Iliad about Achilles' war against the Troas, and it's an interesting story. His friend took his bride-to-be, and he went back and sold. He said, I'm not going to go back to fight anymore. Meanwhile, they're getting defeated, and finally his best friend says, we can't go on. And so he puts on Achilles' armors and goes there and fights and does really well. And since he does so well, he pushes too far forward, and the other person, the hero on the other side, kills him. And so Achilles is so upset. But his friend says, I'll give you all the riches of Troas. I'll give you all the riches. I'll give you glory. Everyone extol you if you just come back. And you know what he said? My life. He used the word suko, soul, the same word that Jesus is using here. What would you give for your soul? My soul is worth more than all the fame and glory, than the riches. I will not exchange my life for those riches. He understands that life is more precious than fame and glory. Well, later he did go, and he was struck down because an archer hit his heel, and that's why it's called Achilles' heel to this day, because it was his weak point, because his mother dropped him in the river, it held him by the heel, and it was his weak point, and that's where he died. We all have our Achilles' heel. Satan knows the thing that'll tempt us. He said, well, it's not money for me. Well, what is it? Everyone has their weak point where Satan will say, hey, come on over here. This will be fun and exciting, and it's not wrong in itself, but it gets us so distracted, we end up selling our soul. We sacrifice everything that's important to us for a short-term pleasure. Moses says he forsook the riches of Egypt for the greater riches of Christ. He saw it himself. And it's the rare man or woman that sees that. What would you give? So when we bring it all to a close, really the question comes down on the promise. The Son of Man is coming back. He went to prepare a place for you and me. When he comes back with his angels, he will repay every man. That word repay, as we suggested as we began, is reward. Reward. And again, that's a great paradox. God says, I'll reward you. Don't worry about it, now just serve me. Do you ever see The Ultimate Gift? There's a movie called The Ultimate Gift. And it parallels, really, the story of Christ and a disciple. There was this young man who had a really rich grandfather, a billionaire. And his father worked for him, so his father is rich, and so the son was rich too. But his father, while he was overseas, got killed, and he always resented his grandfather for his dad dying. Well, eventually the grandfather died himself. And so he went to the reading of the will, and the trustee said, well, your grandfather left you, an estate, but you have to learn 12 life lessons. And over the next year, if you learn these lessons, according to the satisfaction of your grandfather who wrote the terms down, you'll get your inheritance. Well, he's upset about it, but he fulfills the first lesson and then comes back to his apartment. He had a fancy apartment. It's all cleaned out. He goes out to he had a fancy car. It was a restored muscle car. It's been towed away. Then he goes out, takes his girlfriend to a restaurant, and they refuse his credit card because everything's been taken from him. So his girlfriend leaves him. She had a fancy girlfriend too, right? Imagine that. She left him when he didn't have money to pay for the dinner. He goes to his mother for help, and she says, under the conditions, I can't help you, the requirements. So now he goes from really rich, spoiled kid to a guy living on the street. And he meets up with a lady who has a terminally ill child named Emily. And he befriends her because lesson 2 is to find someone that you're truly a friend to, because he had just superficial friends. And he finally talks him into coming to the trustees, say, hey, I've got 2 friends. And they did it. Then afterwards, he just kind of ignores them until he learns later that the daughter is terminally ill. The rest of the story is how he learns these life lessons and seeks out to try to get some help for her to cure her illness. And then he's going to build, before they could do that, she dies. And he's completed all the 12 life lessons, and he goes back and he's a changed man entirely. And the trustees say, you've learned these well. We're so impressed. Here's $100 million. And he immediately goes out and builds Emily's house, a hospital or care for terminally ill people. He uses none of the money for himself. That old man is dead. And they're so impressed, they call him in again and said, you've passed our expectations about these lessons. It's your grandfather has determined in his will, if you did, to leave you $2.1 billion. That's our God. He promises his riches in the future, and he promises to take care of us right now. I don't have anything to worry about. So the question is, Lord, what do you want me to do with the rest of my life while I'm waiting for riches, living in glory right now? He said, I just ask one thing. Quit living for yourself, grabbing, and start living for others. Do what my son did. Because as the psalmist said, you can't redeem your brother except at awful cost. And the glory that God is giving us here and now and future is free to us. It's the ultimate gift, isn't it? And it's free to us, but it came at terrible cost. The cost of God himself dying on the cross. And when we enjoy the privileges and the blessings of this gift that's free to us, we ask, well, what do you want me to do since all my needs are taken care of? He says, don't spend your life now on yourself. Deny yourself, serve others, and you'll have glory later. That's what he meant. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. If you lose your life now, you'll save it later. But if you just try to grab on it now, you'll lose it forever. The greatest among you all will be the servant of you all. Because that's what God did for us. So we leave you just with this exhortation. Don't waste your life. Young people, it's just so short. Don't waste your life chasing things that have great promise but can't fulfill, they can't deliver. People that are the middle age, you got your kids, I know, and it just drives you crazy because all your time is consumed. Don't waste your life just trying to grab stuff. Keep the perspective of what's really important. A lot of older people, sometimes they get tired and weary and they just want to quit. You're so close to the goal. Don't give up. Don't waste all that time you've invested, because the free gift is just around the corner. Let's set our priorities and not just say it in word, but say it in deed. Because a lot of people say, well, I'm offended you suggest that I'm not following Christ. I would give my life in a moment for Jesus. Yeah, but you won't give a moment of your life for Jesus. You say you'll die for him, but a lot of times people won't give one moment for him because they're so busy doing other things. So those questions of Jesus just ring in her head. What would you give? Now that's hypothetical, the word would. What would you give if you could buy your place in heaven? What would you give to buy your soul back? And so we have to make it more personal. What will you give? It's not hypothetical. It's a question that he's asking of us, each of us individually. What are you giving? What are you willing to give for Jesus? How much do you value his ultimate gift in heaven? We're going to sing a song, and I'm glad that Kevin practiced it. Hope that the people that sang it in the days past can help carry it. But it just asks that question, what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? If we can help you anyway, won't you stand as Kevin comes forward and we'll sing that song.